all the time in the same way. It is also a double-edged sword that needs to be dealt very carefully. And sometimes it also subjugates, manipulates, and exploits us. This is what happens in the case of Iago. That's how he could influence Othello. Iago, I'm quoting Cohen here, Iago Vitili speaks not just before the audience, and he speaks a lot, uttering 200 more lines than Othello, more than any other Shakespeare character except Hamlet and Richard III. I'm quoting Cohen. Why does he speak more? What wonders the audience or reader is the verbal dominance of the villain. Usually hero or a very major character does this, but it happens in the case of Iago here in this tragedy. The play is entirely under the control of Iago. And specifically, when I try to show how this by saying he's doing something, say, the first thing is that after targeting Cassio, after getting him suspended, his focus now moves towards Desdemona, and he wants to create an impression that she's unfaithful, disloyal to him, and when he reiterates this, Taylor says, I'll see before I doubt. When I doubt, prove. And on the proof, there is no more but this. Away at once with love or jealousy. Iago's responsibility of producing evidence and proving Desdemona as an unfaithful wife surges with this act of saying. Means when he says that you provide me evidence to prove her unfaithful, so here the task of Iago begins. First thing is that he takes it up very gladly, saying that he would show his love to Othello immediately. And he asks him, look to your wife, observe her well with Cassio, wear your eyes thus, not jealous, nor secure. Though Othello is asked not to be biased in his judgment, he is not allowed to think or observe anything on his own because he is overpowered by the words of Iago. He doesn't allow him at all to think. His thoughts are overpowered. Reason makes the words of Iago so powerful. These are the things that he says. I know our country disposition well. In Venice, they do let heaven see the pranks. They dare not show their husbands their best consigns. Is not to leave it undone, but kept unknown. What Iago is doing here, immediately Othello responds, dost thou say so? See, the man is gradually coming under the power of words of Iago. So what he is doing is, it's reason. Using the entire women of Venice and making it specific to Desdemona. So this is what is called as two premises on which he wants to lead to an inference. This is like this. See, all Venetian women do wrong things and keep as and they keep it unknown. Desdemona is a Venetian, so it automatically leads to the inference she too does wrong thing. So I don't argue here whether that Shakespeare was aware of detectivism, but what works here is reason. So he could immediately convince or restrain Othello to his words because of this reason. And here, I think I have tried to say how these two premises have helped him to draw a conclusion, an inference that Desdemona is also one who commits wrong. And the second thing is that the human engagement with words is boundless. Certain words arise in certain situations, leave an indelible imprint on the mind. One such significant statement that penetrates deep into Othello's mind is the assertion made by Brabantio about his daughter that comes out of shock when she confirms her love for Othello in the presence of the Duke. She has deceived her father and made thee. Right? And when this statement is reiterated by Iago in an appropriate context, again, context is adding to the linguistic level of meaning. It poisons Othello's mind, and next to it, he persuades Othello by saying that, say, she did deceive her father marrying you, and when she seemed to shake and fear your looks, she loved them most. Othello, yeah, and so she did. Iago, why then? Why go to them? So it is what we call as inductive reasoning, taking a specific thing and generalizing it. So this generalization goes to the extent that in the end, when Othello kills her, before that, this causal assertion that he makes here is, she must die, else she will betray more men. See, that specific thing was generalized by Iago, and further it was generalized by Othello himself. So this is what we call as inductive reasoning. So that reason has again worked. And the last thing that I would like to specify here is, you know, even the very good qualities of Desdemona is subverted against her. Again, reason helps Iago. Iago is very effective in using it. See, actually, it is her blind love for Othello, for his bravery, etc., that convinces her to fall in love with him. But even it is subverted. See, he says so. See, though Desdemona loves Othello's inner spirit, and it is her intuition, it's not rationality, it's intuition that makes her blind towards race and other rational aspects, which usually restrict a white woman to prefer a Moor. Iago projects the very nature of Desdemona's accepting of Othello as something very abnormal and succeeds in making him believe that she cannot be trusted, as her thoughts are very unnatural, her nature is mutable, and thus she may revise her judgment of choice. Right? So again, what is working here is reason. So she could make a wrong choice, and she could think unnaturally while choosing you. She can change her choice, is other way of extending. Means reason is again working. It is also inductive reasoning. So what helps entirely in the play, Iago, to overpower Othello is reason. So that's why the paper concludes. So this reason never allows Othello to move beyond linguistic reasoning. See, for example, when I get into my chamber, when my colleague who doesn't care for me on usual days, when he wishes me on the very day of DC meeting, I immediately go to the second level, illocutionary level. So he wants to pacify me, not to take up anything against him on that particular day. So I don't get restricted. So he is greeting me very cordially. I don't think so. I immediately move to the second level, and I think about the third level, the effect that he wants to create on me. But that doesn't happen in the case of Othello. It is because he is getting restrained to the first level, the locutionary level, the linguistic meaning which is given by Othello. He never goes beyond it because he is very much convinced by the reasons given by Iago. This is how I would like to conclude my paper.
Thank you, ma'am, for explaining how complex the characters are in Shakespeare's plays. The question for this papers, all papers will be could be asked at the end of the session. Now, I would like to invite Deepak Kalburgi, Assistant Professor, for presenting his paper on the title Intricacies of Human Nature in William.
Thank you. Before I begin my paper, I would like to thank Honorable Professor Dono sir for organizing such seminar for the all-round development of the students of language and literature. I would like to directly begin my paper. The topic which I have chosen today to speak in this seminar, it is intricacies of human behavior in William Shakespeare's play Hamlet. One particular question arises: why Hamlet? Because here we come across how Hamlet is different from other tragedies of William Shakespeare. William Shakespeare has focused on one particular character and his own point of view, a single character that showcases the struggles of Prince Hamlet, who happens to be the Danish prince, and the word intricacies, which also parallelly means the complexities of human behavior. Human nature is a term that encompasses the hopes, desires, jealousy, virtues, madness, hatred, and flaws that are intrinsic to human nature and humanity. At the core of these characteristics are our intricacies. William Shakespeare, the greatest dramatist of Elizabethan era, was a champion who provides fascinating insight into human nature in his tragedies. The intricacies of human nature are explored through tragic plays and complex relationships with one another. This paper explores the intricacies of human nature in major characters of William Shakespeare's play in Hamlet. In this tragedy, we see a brother, Claudius, who actually has to safeguard his brother, King Hamlet, but he murders him because he was a power monger. Women characters like Gertrude and Ophelia. Gertrude, who represents intemperately lustful and self-indulged individual, and Ophelia, who is a representative of femininity and fragility in display, they change immediately. Hamlet is not the only character in Shakespeare's play who offers a soliloquy, but Claudius, who gives speeches in this play, Hamlet's uncle, and the murder of Hamlet's father, also gives us detailed insight into his thoughts. One thing that rules in this Hamlet play is the situation. We become victims to the circumstances. Providence is at work. The play Hamlet is much about betrayal, manipulative nature, intelligence, and mourning. In the play of Hamlet, it is found to create several intricacies in order to attract attention and impression of readers and give moral values of life. In Hamlet, Shakespeare tries to provide some internal and external conflicts, which creates the tragedy of suffer, revenge, and death. King Claudius in this play is both intelligent and well spoken, two traits that put together complement his manipulative and dangerous nature. In fact, it is his conscience that makes Claudius such a complex villain. He rose to power by carefully executing the murder of his brother, by killing his own brother. In this play, Hamlet is introduced as a troubled man. We see that the whole play, it revolves around two main characters, Hamlet and his uncle Claudius. One is sufferer, another one is a complex villain with betrayal and manipulative nature. Claudius is very careful and clever. Hamlet is overthinking and lamenting. Deep depressive nature of Hamlet put him into mental trauma and he is very emotionally stricken. He was mourning the death of his beloved father and his mother's marriage to his uncle. His mother Gertrude was very swift to get married to Claudius. In Act 1 and Scene 2, Claudius gives Hamlet a speech to try to get him to stop bringing up his father, probably fearing that more the late king was talked about or remembered, the more likely people were to look into his death. It is understandable that he wanted Hamlet to move on quickly. The speech seems carefully planned out, as if Claudius had written it out before he delivered it. Hamlet had probably been lamenting his father's death for quite some time now, so Claudius had ample time to compose the speech. Hamlet was even convinced by laters that his grief shows a will most incorrect to heaven. his father is dead and he is in heaven. But it isn't until later we find the ghost, which is not in heaven, but instead suffering in sulfurous and tormenting flames. After hearing about his father's murder, Hamlet saddened quickly, turns into anger. He plots the revenge that he feels his father deserves. Gertrude, who is instrumental in handling the emotional Hamlet. After all, it is she who convinces Hamlet not to go to Wittenberg, showing how well Claudius is able to manipulate people. We also see in this play that Latus has returned from France to find that his father is killed. His father is killed by Hamlet. Polonius has been murdered. He first blames the king, but Claudius places the blame on Hamlet. While speaking to Latus, Claudius suddenly receives a letter in which it's written Hamlet was alive and returning home. Claudius, being opportunistic, is very sneaky, finds yet another way to avoid killing Hamlet himself in Latus. Claudius' speech to Latus in light in this news is very off the cuff, clearly lacking in preparation in comparison to his speech to Hamlet on Mourning for Fathers. It is notably shorter than his speech to Hamlet. With the preparations, we see that Claudius insinuates that not to act would be evidence for him not loving his father, saying that not that I think you did not love your father, but that I know love is begun by time, and that I see in passages of proof. His tone is probably hinting that yes, he does want Latus to think that he doesn't love his father if he doesn't act. Going on Claudius, he says that time qualifies the sparks and fire of it. They, within the very flames of love, a kind of wick or snuff that will abate it, alluding to the idea that over time a candle wick will burn down, as well as Latus' feeling for this father. This is why Claudius wants Latus to act as soon as possible when his feelings are fresh and raw. A candle will burn down on its own, but the snuff requires action. And to get closer over his father's death, he needs to take action against Hamlet. He then compares inaction to pleurisy, which can mean excess or even a chest inflammation, coinciding with the theme of sickness that was appeared throughout the play. Is he insinuating that him taking too much time to think about it could lead to sickness? His comparison here does not seem too well throughout. Maybe it pertains to the next lines where Claudius dies in his own too much that we should do when we would. For this would changes, indicating that he would stress over regrets he had about not acting. Note the repetition of the would, an attempt to drive his point into Latus' brain even further. At the very concluding part of the play, we see that there is a trial between Latus and Hamlet. Both get killed, even Gertrude get killed by drinking the poison cup. Intricacies of human nature are a force or a tension which are bound to circumstances. In a play like Hamlet, intricacies is one of the elements that is required to make the story interesting and interesting to the reader and to understand the psychology of the major characters of the play. It is also required to educate the audience how to solve the problems of life. Some scenes in the play make the play alive, namely, Hamlet, after the death of his father, is in shock when he sees his father's spirit urging him to take revenge on the death of his father. It informs him to take the crown from the cruel king. Hamlet also gets a deep suffer on a marriage of his mother to someone who has murdered his father. Ophelia is also seen in a deep, confused state of mind on her affair with Hamlet, which is refused by her father and brother. It becomes a burden in her thought, and she gets a deep suffer from death of her father, even when she knows that someone who killed her father was Hamlet. The tension between Hamlet and Claudius is about revenge and convince. Hamlet wants to take revenge, on the murder of his father by Claudius. Otherwise, Claudius has a plan to kill Hamlet to hide the secret of his killing his brother. What I would like to conclude at the end of my paper, the moral values that the play shower on its readers are really useful, teaching the people that the revenge is not good conduct for human, because it only leads to additional suffering of everybody or himself and bring death. The greediness will affect everyone and give a loss to someone else. The greediness of wealth and power can bring someone to do a bad thing like murdering someone else. It, of course, really spoils oneself and other people. Thank you very much for giving me a time to present my paper. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Thank you for your thoughtful lecture highlighting intricacies of human nature in Shakespeare's dramas. Now the session is open for discussion. So you can ask question to the respective speakers.
I think, forget the names, but anyway, one of the presenters spoke about strong women characters in Shakespeare. My feeling is there is a conflict between Shakespeare, Elizabethan male, and Shakespeare the artist when it comes to the creation of strong women characters. You see the two Portias, one of Merchant of Venice and then Julius Caesar, and Lady Macbeth. They all start out as very strong women, but very soon they show their feminine weakness. Like Brutus's Portia, who is ready to actually gash her thighs to show that she can keep a secret, but she cannot. That is, when all this bravado in women is very temporary. In the end, they give in to their feminine weaknesses. So somewhere I see a conflict between the artist who has a more feminist perspective or more human kind of a perspective towards women, but as a man living in a highly patriarchal society, he too is prejudiced and biased, in this case. So I find this with most of Shakespeare's women characters. Lady Macbeth starts out as such a strong woman, and Macbeth as a rather weak-minded person, and she fills him with strength, but he grows from strength to strength. With every murder, he becomes less, he's less bothered by any sense of guilt, etc. But Lady Macbeth, becomes weaker and weaker until she's unable to get over that guilt. This is my observation. Generally, I think there is this kind of a conflict between the artist and the Elizabethan male. Any of the presenters can respond to that.
Thank you, madam, for your observation. What I feel is that, of course, Shakespeare doesn't want to make all the women very strong, but he wants to present a woman as a woman. And even though Lady Macbeth says that, so before murdering Duncan, oh my husband, please strengthen me as a man, make me a man, she said.
Unsex me.
Yeah, unsex me, so she said. And when he said, that Lady Macbeth said, so I would have murdered this Duncan if he has not been disturbed my father, he said, as he said like that. and she's true to woman's nature, I think so. See, he wants to present the nature of a woman. He wants to humanize them. That's what I noticed. And women characters should be presented as women, of course, and male characters are presented as male characters. That's the psychology of that he presented. That's what I noticed now.
Ma'am, I would like to add a few lines to what my close friend and classmate, Dr. Goldgon said. See, and anti-feminism, keeping it apart. Shakespearean heroines are ideal of their own stature. While writing a love poem when I was in my UG days, I couldn't compare my beloved, who was an imaginary girl. So I said, "You're Shakespearean Portia." So that way, Portia for me is an ideal lady. Of course, every human being must have his or her flaws, weaknesses, lacunas. Otherwise, he or she would be a divine being. And divine beings are unfit to live among the uh, people. So that way, Shakespearean heroines compared to other characters of other people seem to be ideal. In that way, as we say, some people who saw, who read that Pride and Prejudice fell after that heroine, and similarly, those bachelors who studied Shakespeare's Portia very seriously, they went on searching Portia in flesh and blood, and they couldn't get. That is why they remained bachelors. So that way, it is my submission, and of course, keeping apart these, as Dr. Donor and I used to say, ವಾದ ವಿವಾದ ಸಂವಾದ ವಾಗ್ವಾದಗಳಿಗಿಂತಲೂ ಜೀವನ ಮುಖ್ಯ ಅಂತ. ಯಾಕಂದ್ರೆ ಜೀವನಕ್ಕೋಸ್ಕರ ಇವೆಲ್ಲ ಈ ವಿವಿಧ ಈ ಇಸಮ್ಗಳು ತರ್ಕಗಳು that actor portrayed by in that role, Pride and Prejudice, compared to these two characters, Shakespearean characters as well as charactered by that lady Jane Austen. Sorry, because I have not taught optional English or basic English for last 27 years as a principal of a government college. Of course, basic English would be now onwards. Very soon, I'm going to start PC and other things in my college. Now onwards, probably I would be able to invite stalwarts like you and Donu and other people who are having direct touch with these literary personalities. And now onwards, I would abreast myself of these things. It is my humble submission, madam, that Shakespearean heroines, keeping apart all station. Thank you.
Is it Dr. Bhatt from Hebrew? I find that you have done a delightfully original thinking on this blood imagery, because two things in Macbeth. One is the gauntlet of the king, the other is blood. And the way you have tried to relate Tulu film with Macbeth is, in my opinion, an original idea, a fascinating idea. Because I remember my own teacher, Polanki Ramurthy, pursued one idea of fear in Macbeth. I don't know if anybody has pursued this. And perhaps he is the only critic who has been included in the essays and essays published in England. In those days, in 10 years, it was the only paper by an Indian. Of course, there are two papers from Dr. S. Nagarajan and Professor Bilji Patil from Baroda in Signet Classics. I'm sure if you expand your study, it will be an original contribution, sir. It's just my word of praise for you. Thank you very much. It opened my eyes.
Thank you. Thank you very much, sir. I request those who are interested in adaptations of Shakespeare to watch this Tulu movie, because I could only, within the given time, I could only present 2 or 3 clippings to make it effective. But as we look at the movie very carefully, everything that is significant in the original is taken up. Say for